March 18, 1943. 22,000 feet above the English Midlands. 0247 hours. Oberfeldwebel Karl Becker adjusted his oxygen mask and scanned the darkness outside his Heinkel He 111 bomber's cockpit, watching for the telltale exhaust flames of British night fighters. After 14 months flying night bombing raids over England, the 28-year-old pilot had developed instincts for survival, constant vigilance, frequent altitude changes, never flying straight and level for more than 30 seconds, always watching for the glint of moonlight on a fighter's canopy. Navigator, time to target? Becker asked over the intercom, his voice calm despite the tension that always accompanied missions over England. 12 minutes to Birmingham, Herr Oberfeldwebel, replied Feldwebel Ernst Weber from his position in the nose. Maintain current heading. No searchlights detected yet. Becker allowed himself a moment of confidence. They had penetrated English defenses without detection, the night was dark with heavy cloud cover that hid them from ground observers, and in 12 minutes they would drop their 2,000 kilograms of high explosive on British industrial targets and turn for home. Another successful mission, another night survived. Then, without warning, without any sign of approaching danger, without seeing or hearing anything that suggested threat, Becker's aircraft exploded in fire and destruction as cannon shells and machine gun bullets tore through it from behind and below. The Heinkel shuddered violently as its right engine burst into flames, the fuselage was stitched by what sounded like a chainsaw cutting through metal, and the aircraft began a sickening roll to starboard as control surfaces were severed. "We're hit! We're hit!" screamed the dorsal gunner, Gefreiter Hans Fischer, over the intercom. "I never saw him. There was nothing there and then we were hit." What Becker and his crew didn't know, what no Luftwaffe night bomber crew could have imagined, was that they had been stalked for the past 8 minutes by an aircraft they couldn't see, couldn't hear, and couldn't detect until the moment its guns opened fire. A de Havilland Mosquito night fighter equipped with AIMK-4 radar had detected their bomber from 5.5 miles away, approached from behind and below using radar guidance alone, closed to 200 yards without ever being visible or audible to the German crew, and then opened fire with 4 20mm cannon and 4.303 machine guns that delivered 8 pounds of metal per second into the undefended bomber. In the next 18 months, these invisible wooden hunters would systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's night bombing force, shooting down over 600 German aircraft in circumstances where the victims never saw their attackers until the guns opened fire. The radar-equipped Mosquito represented warfare's evolution from visual combat to electronic warfare, where detection, tracking, and killing could occur entirely through instruments, where darkness was no longer protection but a hunting ground for predators with electronic eyes that saw in the dark better than human eyes could see in daylight. Among the RAF night fighter crews operating over England in March 1943 were men who would become legends, pilots and radar operators whose teamwork would perfect the art of invisible death. But on that night, they were professional hunters doing a job that required technical precision, absolute coordination, and the cold-blooded willingness to kill enemies who never knew they were being hunted. This is the story of how radar changed night warfare forever, how the Mosquito became the Luftwaffe's unseen executioner, and how German bomber crews learned that darkness was no longer their ally but their enemy, a medium through which British electronics could see them clearly while they remained blind to the death approaching from behind. The de Havilland Mosquito's genesis had nothing to do with night fighting. Conceived in 1938 as a fast, unarmed light bomber that would rely on speed rather than defensive armament to survive, the Mosquito was initially rejected by the Air Ministry as too radical. Its wooden construction, using plywood and balsa rather than strategic aluminum, seemed primitive when other nations were building all-metal aircraft. But de Havilland's gamble proved revolutionary. The Mosquito's wooden structure was lighter than metal, easier to repair, and didn't require strategic materials needed for other aircraft. Powered by 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the same power plants that made the Spitfire legendary, the Mosquito achieved speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour, faster than most contemporary fighters despite being a twin-engine aircraft with 2-man crew. What made the Mosquito perfect for night fighting wasn't just its speed but its versatility. The basic airframe could be configured as bomber, photo reconnaissance, or fighter with minimal modification. The night fighter variant, designated Mosquito NF2, mounted 420mm Hispano cannon in the belly and 4.303 Browning machine guns in the nose, firepower that could destroy heavy bombers in brief bursts. But the revolutionary element was what couldn't be seen from outside: the AI, Airborne Interception, Mk4 radar. Mounted in the Mosquito's nose, this radar could detect aircraft at ranges up to 5.5 miles, track their position continuously, and guide the night fighter to within visual range, or in many cases, to firing range without the target ever being visually acquired. Wing Commander James Richardson, commanding RAF 157 Squadron equipped with Mosquito night fighters in early 1943, understood immediately what the combination of aircraft and radar meant. We're not night fighters in the traditional sense, pilots with exceptional eyesight hunting visually in the dark. We're electronic hunters using radar to find targets we could never see with eyes alone. The Mosquito gives us speed to catch anything the Germans fly. The radar gives us the ability to find them in total darkness. The combination is lethal. The radar system required 2 crew members working in perfect coordination. The pilot flew the aircraft and fired the weapons. The radar operator, officially termed Navigator but functioning as electronic systems operator, monitored the radar display, identified targets, guided the pilot through interception geometry, and managed the complex electronics that made invisible warfare possible. Flight Lieutenant Robert Mitchell, one of Richardson's most successful pilot radar operator teams, described the new warfare in a March 1943 training lecture. Traditional night fighting relied on ground controllers guiding you toward enemy aircraft, then visual acquisition and attack. Success depended on weather, moon phase, visibility, and luck. AI radar changes everything. We detect the enemy before they know we exist. We track them continuously regardless of darkness or clouds. We approach from their blind spot using radar guidance. They never know we're there until our guns fire. The German bombers are blind, Mitchell continued. They have no airborne radar. They rely on darkness for protection. But darkness doesn't hide them from our radar. Every bomber shows up on our scopes as a bright blip. We see them from 5 miles away. They don't see us until we're 200 yards away, and by then they have 2 seconds to live. The AI Mk4 radar, while revolutionary, was also temperamental and required skilled operators. The cathode ray tube display showed returns from ground clutter, weather, and aircraft in a confusing pattern that inexperienced operators struggled to interpret. But trained radar operators learned to distinguish aircraft returns from ground reflections, to calculate intercept angles geometrically, and to guide their pilots through complex three-dimensional approaches that brought the Mosquito into perfect firing position without the target ever detecting pursuit. Flight Sergeant David Thompson, a radar operator with over 30 successful intercepts by spring 1943, explained the technique. The radar shows range and bearing but not altitude precisely. You must infer altitude from the target's behavior and ground returns. You guide your pilot through geometry, matching altitude, reducing closure rate as you approach, positioning behind and slightly below the target where their gunners have limited visibility. When you're at 200 yards, you tell your pilot contact ahead, and he searches visually for final confirmation before firing. The Germans have no idea we're there, Thompson added. They're flying in darkness thinking they're invisible. But to us, they're bright dots on a radar screen. We own the night now. They just don't know it yet. By summer 1943, RAF Mosquito night fighter operations had evolved from opportunistic interceptions into systematic hunting that covered English airspace with overlapping radar coverage. Ground control radars detected incoming German bomber streams, vectored Mosquito night fighters into patrol positions, then handed off individual targets to the airborne radar that completed the kill. Wing Commander Richardson's 157 Squadron, now one of the most successful Mosquito units, had refined their tactics through operational experience into a methodology that made German bomber survival increasingly improbable. Squadron standing orders emphasized teamwork, radar discipline, and aggressive pursuit that gave German bombers no chance to escape once detected. Every German bomber crossing the English coast is a potential kill, Richardson told his crews during a June 1943 operational briefing. Ground control identifies them and vectors us to intercept positions. Your radar picks them up at 5 miles. You close to firing range using radar guidance alone. You achieve visual at 300 yards, confirm target identity, close to 200 yards, and kill with a 2-second burst. The Germans never see you. They never hear you. They die in darkness without understanding what killed them. This is not heroic combat, Richardson continued. This is systematic execution enabled by technical superiority. The Germans have no defense against radar-guided attacks. Their gunners can't shoot what they can't see. Their pilots can't evade what they don't know is following them. We exploit this advantage ruthlessly. Flight Lieutenant Robert Mitchell and his radar operator Flight Sergeant David Thompson, now the squadron's most successful team with 18 confirmed kills, demonstrated the system's effectiveness during a mission on June 23, 1943. Ground control vectored them toward a German bomber formation approaching from the North Sea. Thompson detected the first contact at 5.4 miles, identified it as a likely Junkers Ju-88 based on its radar return characteristics, and guided Mitchell through a textbook intercept. The pursuit took 7 minutes. Thompson provided continuous guidance, turn left 10 degrees, reduce speed to 260. Target descending slightly, match their descent, while Mitchell flew precisely, trusting his operator's instructions completely. At 400 yards, Thompson reported visual range, and Mitchell began searching for the target visually. Contact ahead, 300 yards, level, Mitchell called, acquiring the Ju-88 silhouetted against slightly lighter sky. He moved into firing position, steadied his aim, and fired a 3-second burst. The German bomber exploded spectacularly as cannon shells detonated in its bomb bay, the aircraft disintegrating in midair. Mitchell had no time to observe the destruction. Thompson had already detected a second contact and was guiding him toward it. New target, bearing 350, range 3 miles, same altitude. Turn right heading 350. This one's climbing. Mitchell followed the guidance, beginning a second radar-guided pursuit while the wreckage of his first victim fell burning toward the sea below. The second interception took 8 minutes and ended identically, visual acquisition at 300 yards, firing at 200, target destroyed in seconds, crew dead before they understood they'd been attacked. Mitchell and Thompson flew 4 more interceptions that night, destroying 5 German bombers total in a 4-hour patrol. Their ammunition expenditure, approximately 300 cannon shells and 1,200 machine gun rounds, roughly 1% of total ammunition carried. Their fuel consumption, normal for a 4-hour patrol. Their risk exposure, minimal, no German defensive fire, no damage to their aircraft, no injuries. That's what radar-equipped night fighting looks like, Richardson told his assembled crews during the post-mission debrief. 5 kills in 4 hours by 1 crew. The Germans had no chance. They were lambs in a slaughterhouse, except the slaughterhouse was English airspace and we were the butchers. This is industrial warfare, systematic, efficient, emotionless killing enabled by technical superiority. But while the killing was emotionless during operations, some crews struggled with the moral implications of attacking defenseless enemies. Flight Lieutenant Christopher Webb, a newer pilot with 6 kills, raised the concern during a quiet conversation in the officers' mess. It feels like murder sometimes. They never see us. Never have a chance to fight back. We just execute them. Richardson's response was honest but firm. You're right, it's not a fair fight. But we're not here for fair fights. We're here to stop German bombers from killing British civilians. Every bomber we destroy is one less bombing Birmingham or Coventry. The technical advantage is ours, and we exploit it without hesitation or guilt. That's warfare in 1943. The full devastation of radar-equipped Mosquito night fighters became apparent during Operation Steinbock, the Luftwaffe's attempt in early 1944 to resume strategic bombing of England using improved tactics and concentrated force. What German planners intended as a renewed offensive became instead a massacre that demonstrated conclusively how completely RAF night fighters dominated English airspace. General Major Dietrich Peltz, commanding the bomber forces assigned to Steinbock, planned to overwhelm British defences through mass attacks, hundreds of bombers striking simultaneously to saturate night fighter coverage. The offensive began on January 21, 1944, with 447 bombers attacking London. Oberfeldwebel Karl Becker, now a highly experienced pilot with over 80 night missions, flew in the first Steinbock raid. His orders were explicit: maintain radio silence, fly evasive courses, vary altitude frequently, and reach the target despite expected heavy night fighter opposition. This is different from previous raids, Becker told his crew during pre-flight briefing. We're going in mass, hundreds of aircraft, all attacking London simultaneously. The British can't stop all of us. Some will be shot down, but most will get through. Stay alert, follow procedures, and we'll make it. But RAF night fighter squadrons, now equipped almost entirely with radar-equipped Mosquitoes, were waiting. Ground control tracked the massive German formation from the moment it crossed the Dutch coast, identified probable routes, and positioned dozens of Mosquito night fighters along the approach paths. Wing Commander Richardson's 157 Squadron alone flew 16 sorties that night, each Mosquito hunting multiple targets. Flight Lieutenant Mitchell and Sergeant Thompson were vectored toward the incoming bomber stream at 2,230 hours and detected their first contact at 5.1 miles, a radar return showing a probable He-111 in the main bomber formation. There are dozens of them, Thompson reported, his radar scope showing multiple contacts. Ground control says we have free fire authority, engage any target we can reach. Mitchell began the first intercept, closing on the leading contact using radar guidance. But as he approached firing range, he saw something that would haunt him for years: not one bomber but a formation of 6, flying in loose defensive box that should have provided mutual protection if they'd been attacked visually. But radar-guided attack from astern rendered their formation irrelevant. Mitchell selected the left rear bomber, close to 200 yards, and fired. The Heinkel exploded, its fuel tanks igniting. Debris from the destroyed bomber struck one of the other aircraft, sending it into a spin. Mitchell calmly selected a second bomber, fired again, and watched it disintegrate. In less than 30 seconds, Mitchell had destroyed 2 bombers and damaged a third, all without the German formation understanding they were under attack. The surviving bombers scattered, breaking formation, jettisoning their bombs, and turning for home, anything to escape the invisible death that was killing them. Numerous bombers breaking formation and retreating, Thompson reported. Ground control reports similar disruption across the entire bomber stream. They're panicking. They were. German bomber crews, faced with invisible attacks that struck without warning, abandoned their mission objectives and fled. Of the 447 bombers that began the mission, fewer than 200 reached London's target area. The remainder turned back, scattered by night fighter attacks they couldn't counter. German losses that night: 57 bombers confirmed destroyed, 32 damaged beyond repair, 89 crews killed or captured. RAF losses, for Mosquitoes to all causes, 0 crews lost. The exchange ratio, over 14 German bombers destroyed for each Mosquito lost, demonstrated the complete dominance of radar-equipped night fighters. Operation Steinbock continued through February and March 1944, with progressively worse results for the Luftwaffe. Each raid saw German bombers destroyed in numbers that made the offensive unsustainable. By late March, Peltz's bomber force had lost over 300 aircraft and crews, nearly 40% of his operational strength, while inflicting minimal damage on British targets. Oberfeldwebel Becker survived 12 Steinbock missions, each one reinforcing his understanding that the Luftwaffe had lost control of English airspace. During his final mission on March 14, 1944, he watched as 4 bombers from his formation were shot down in the space of 10 minutes by unseen attackers, their crews dying without ever seeing what killed them. "We are being hunted," Becker told his crew after landing from that mission. "Not fought, hunted. Like prey animals being stalked by invisible predators. The British have radar or something that lets them see us in total darkness. They track us, close to killing range, and destroy us before we know they're there. This is not combat. This is execution." I've flown 86 missions, Becker continued, his voice heavy with exhaustion and fear. I've watched friends die in circumstances they couldn't understand, killed by enemies they never saw. I don't know how much longer my luck will hold. None of us do. We're flying suicide missions now, and everyone knows it. 3 weeks later, Operation Steinbock was cancelled due to unsustainable losses. The Luftwaffe's night bombing offensive against England was effectively over, defeated not by British courage or determination but by technical superiority that made darkness into an Allied advantage rather than German protection. After Operation Steinbock's catastrophic failure, the Luftwaffe attempted to regain some measure of night fighting capability by deploying their own night fighters, primarily Bf-110 and Ju-88 variants equipped with radar, to patrol over England and intercept RAF bombers. German commanders reasoned that if British night fighters could use radar to hunt German bombers, perhaps German night fighters could use radar to hunt British bombers and even engage the Mosquitoes themselves. What the Luftwaffe didn't know was that RAF scientists had developed a weapon specifically designed to turn German airborne radar into a homing beacon for Allied night fighters. The device, codenamed Serrate, detected emissions from German Liechtenstein radar sets at ranges up to 50 miles and provided RAF Mosquito crews with bearing and approximate range to German night fighters. Instead of the hunter becoming the hunted, German night fighters became prey to an electronic predator they couldn't detect or escape. Squadron leader William Bradford, now commanding a specialized Mosquito unit equipped with both AI radar and Serrate homing equipment, flew the first operational Serrate mission on April 22, 1944. His orders were revolutionary. Instead of waiting for ground control to vector him toward targets, he would patrol over northern France actively hunting for German night fighters using their own radar emissions to track them. Serrate contact bearing 075, strong signal, estimated range 30 miles, his radar operator Flight Lieutenant Christopher Webb reported 20 minutes into the patrol. Looks like a German night fighter with Liechtenstein radar active. He's broadcasting his position to us like a lighthouse. Bradford turned toward the bearing and increased speed, closing the distance while Webb tracked the German radar emissions continuously. The German crew, flying a Bf-110 G4 night fighter from Jagdgeschwader 3, had no idea they were being stalked by an aircraft that was using their own defensive radar against them. At 8 miles, Webb switched from Serrate to AI radar, acquiring the German fighter as a standard radar contact. AI contact confirmed, bearing 070, range 8 miles, altitude appears level with us at 18,000 feet. Beginning standard intercept. The subsequent engagement followed textbook procedure: radar-guided approach, visual acquisition at 400 yards, positive identification of the twin-engine Bf-110, closure to 200 yards, and a 3-second cannon burst that destroyed the German night fighter before its crew understood they'd been attacked. What makes this engagement significant, Bradford wrote in his after-action report, is that we detected and killed a German night fighter using their own radar emissions. They were hunting for British bombers, broadcasting their presence to us through their Liechtenstein radar, completely unaware we could home on their signals. This fundamentally changes the night fighting equation. German night fighters are now prey rather than predators. Over the next 3 months, Serrate-equipped Mosquitoes would destroy 147 German night fighters, often catching them while they were actively hunting for RAF bombers. The psychological impact on Luftwaffe night fighter crews was devastating. They couldn't operate without radar, but using radar made them targets for invisible British hunters who could detect them from impossibly long ranges. Hauptmann Ernst Weber, a German night fighter pilot who survived a Serrate attack in May 1944, described the impossible tactical situation in his post-mission report: was conducting patrol over Normandy when attacked without warning by British fighter. No visual contact before engagement. Received cannon fire from astern. Right engine destroyed, navigator killed, aircraft severely damaged. Managed emergency landing at Évreux with wounded aircraft. Most concerning, Weber's report continued, the British fighter appeared to know our exact position despite darkness and our evasive routing. Strong possibility they can detect our Liechtenstein radar emissions and home on them. If accurate, this makes night fighter operations extremely hazardous. We cannot hunt without radar, but radar broadcasts our position to the enemy. Request immediate investigation and countermeasures. But there were no effective countermeasures. Turning off the radar made German night fighters blind and useless. Leaving the radar on made them targets for Serrate-equipped Mosquitoes. German night fighter effectiveness collapsed, and with it, the Luftwaffe's last hope of contesting Allied air superiority at night. By summer 1944, the cumulative psychological impact of radar-equipped night fighters on German bomber and night fighter crews had become catastrophic. Pilots and navigators who had flown confidently at night in earlier years now approached night operations with dread, knowing that invisible death could strike without warning at any moment. Oberfeldwebel Karl Becker, who had survived Operation Steinbock and continued flying night missions through spring 1944, experienced the psychological breakdown firsthand. After his 94th mission on June 8, 1944, a mission during which he watched 3 bombers from his formation destroyed by unseen attackers, Becker reported to his flight surgeon with symptoms that would today be recognized as severe combat stress reaction. "I cannot fly at night anymore," Becker told the doctor, his hands shaking as he spoke. "Every mission, we lose aircraft to invisible attackers. We never see them. Never hear them. Just explosions and fire and men dying. I have nightmares about being attacked in darkness by something I cannot see or fight. My crew are terrified. We all know we will eventually be killed by something we cannot defend against." The flight surgeon's report documented what was becoming epidemic among Luftwaffe night crews. Patient presents with classic symptoms of combat exhaustion including sleep disturbance, hypervigilance, anxiety response to aircraft engine sounds, and intrusive memories of combat trauma. He reports that his entire crew experiences similar symptoms. States that night operations have become psychologically unbearable due to inability to detect or counter enemy night fighters. Assessment: unfit for flight duties pending psychiatric evaluation. Becker was not alone. Across the Luftwaffe's night bomber and fighter forces, crews were developing what medical officers termed radar psychosis, an anxiety disorder specifically triggered by the knowledge that invisible enemies could detect and attack them without warning. Symptoms included refusal to fly, physical illness before missions, panic attacks in the aircraft, and in extreme cases, complete psychological breakdown. General Major Dietrich Peltz, surveying the remnants of his bomber force in July 1944, understood that he no longer commanded an effective fighting force. His assessment to Luftwaffe High Command was brutally honest: night bomber operations against England are no longer militarily viable. Crews understand they cannot survive against British radar-equipped night fighters. Morale has collapsed. Some crews refuse to fly. Others fly missions but jettison bombs early and return claiming mechanical problems. We are not an offensive force, we are frightened men flying doomed missions because orders require it. The British night fighters are killing us with near impunity, Peltz's report continued. Our losses exceed 20% per mission, unsustainable by any military standard. Replacement crews arrive with minimal training and are lost on their first or second mission. The experienced crews who survive multiple missions are psychologically damaged by sustained exposure to invisible death. We have lost the night. Recommend immediate cessation of offensive night operations and redeployment of remaining assets to defensive roles where psychological pressure may be reduced. But defensive roles offered little psychological relief. Whether flying offensive missions over England or defensive patrols over Germany, Luftwaffe night crews faced the same invisible enemy with the same lethal capabilities. The Mosquito with its radar could detect them anywhere, approach unseen, and kill without warning. There was no safe mission profile, no tactical solution, no escape from the electronic eyes that saw in darkness better than human eyes saw in daylight. Flight Lieutenant Robert Mitchell, the RAF pilot whose crew had achieved over 40 kills by summer 1944, recognized the psychological impact during a mission over France in August. His radar operator detected a German bomber that, instead of flying toward its target, was flying evasive patterns suggesting the crew suspected they were being followed. Target is maneuvering randomly, Flight Sergeant Thompson reported. Changing altitude every 30 seconds, turning frequently, varying speed. They're scared. Mitchell closed to visual range and watched the German bomber, a Ju-88, execute violent evasive maneuvers in empty sky, the crew clearly terrified of invisible attack despite no evidence they'd been detected. Mitchell could have shot them down easily, but something about watching the frantic evasion of an aircraft whose crew were dying of fear made him hesitate. "They know we're out here somewhere," Mitchell said over the intercom. "They're trying to evade an enemy they can't see or detect. It's like watching a trapped animal." "Take the shot," Thompson replied, his voice cold. "They'd kill British civilians if they reached their target. They're enemy combatants, not victims." Mitchell fired, the Ju-88 exploded, and another German crew died in darkness without ever seeing what killed them. But the incident stayed with Mitchell, and in a letter to his wife written that evening, he reflected on the nature of radar warfare. "We're not really fighting anymore, we're executing. The Germans have no defense, no counter, no hope. They fly missions knowing they'll probably die, killed by enemies they cannot see or fight. I suppose we should feel satisfaction at our superiority, but I mostly feel empty. It's too easy. Too one-sided. Not war, just killing." Desperate to counter the radar-equipped Mosquito threat, German scientists and engineers attempted to develop technological and tactical solutions throughout 1944. Every attempt failed, highlighting the extent to which Allied electronic warfare capabilities had surpassed German technical capacity. The first German countermeasure was Flensburg, a receiver that detected emissions from British AI radar, theoretically allowing German night fighters to home on RAF bombers and fighters using their own radar. But Flensburg had critical limitations. It could only detect older AI Mk4 radar, was less sensitive than British Serrate equipment, and most fatally, could be deceived by RAF bombers transmitting false signals from Monica tail warning radars. Hauptmann Klaus Werner, a Luftwaffe night fighter pilot equipped with Flensburg in August 1944, discovered its limitations during his first operational sortie. Detected multiple contacts on Flensburg receiver, closed to intercept, found only RAF bomber with Monica transmitter creating false returns. No fighters detected. While investigating bomber contact, was attacked by British night fighter that my Flensburg never detected. Only survived through luck, British pilot's guns jammed after destroying my left engine. Assess Flensburg as unreliable and potentially dangerous. It provides false confidence while offering no protection from radar-equipped fighters. The second German countermeasure was Naxos, equipment to detect British H-2S ground mapping radar carried by RAF bombers, theoretically allowing German fighters to track bomber formations. But Naxos had the same fatal flaw as active radar. It broadcast emissions that Serrate-equipped Mosquitoes could detect and home on. German night fighters using Naxos were simply broadcasting their positions to the hunters stalking them. The tactical countermeasures were equally ineffective. German crews were instructed to fly without radar when possible, but blind flying made them unable to find targets. They were told to implement wild boar tactics, using searchlights and visual acquisition, but this made them easy targets for visual attack by Mosquitoes that had speed advantage. They tried flying at extreme low altitude to hide in ground clutter, but the AIMKX radar that entered service in late 1944 was specifically designed to detect low-altitude targets. "Every countermeasure we develop," wrote Oberst Friedrich Richter in a September 1944 technical assessment, "the British counter within weeks. They have systematic electronic warfare development we cannot match. More critically, their basic system, airborne radar detecting aircraft emissions or returns, is fundamentally sound. We can add complexity, but we cannot overcome the simple reality that they can detect us while we cannot detect them. In electronic warfare, we are one generation behind and falling further back." The industrial disparity compounded the problem. British factories were producing AI radar sets by the hundreds, equipping entire squadrons with standardized equipment. German factories, struggling with strategic bombing and material shortages, could barely produce electronic equipment in prototype quantities. Even successful German developments never reached operational service in meaningful numbers. By late 1944, Luftwaffe night operations had effectively ceased as organized campaigns. Individual aircraft would occasionally attempt missions, but formation flying had become suicide, and even single aircraft stood little chance of surviving encounters with the Mosquito patrols that now ranged freely over German airspace. When Allied intelligence compiled the final statistics of the night air war after Germany's surrender, the numbers revealed the extent to which radar-equipped Mosquito night fighters had dominated nocturnal combat. The kill ratios were so lopsided that they redefined what was considered possible in aerial warfare. From the deployment of AI-equipped Mosquitoes in late 1942 through May 1945, RAF night fighter squadrons destroyed approximately 1,247 German aircraft in night combat. Of these, approximately 873 were destroyed by Mosquito night fighters, representing 70% of all German aircraft lost to British night fighters during this period. Mosquito losses to all causes during the same period: 193 aircraft, of which only 47 were lost to enemy action, the remainder to mechanical failures, weather, accidents, and operational causes. The overall kill ratio: 18.6 German aircraft destroyed for each Mosquito lost to enemy action. But the statistics for radar-equipped kills were even more dramatic. When examining only engagements where radar guidance was used for interception, meaning the target was detected, tracked, and engaged using AI or SAR-8 equipment, the success rate exceeded 92%. German aircraft detected by radar-equipped Mosquitoes had less than 8% chance of surviving the encounter. Air Marshal Roderick Hill, commanding RAF Fighter Command, compiled a post-war analysis that captured the significance. The radar-equipped Mosquito night fighter represented the most significant tactical advantage achieved by either side during the nocturnal air war. German night bombers and fighters had no effective defense against radar-guided attacks. They could not detect radar-equipped aircraft approaching them, could not evade radar-guided pursuit, and could not survive the engagement once guns opened fire. The kill ratio of nearly 19-1 in our favor, Hill's analysis continued, reflects not just superior equipment but the fundamental advantage of electronic detection in darkness. Visual night fighting depended on weather, moon phase, visibility, and luck. Radar night fighting eliminated these variables. We could detect, track, and kill enemy aircraft in total darkness, through clouds, regardless of moon phase. The Germans had no comparable capability and no means of developing one given their industrial limitations and our systematic destruction of their electronic research facilities. The pilot survival statistics told an equally stark story. Of the approximately 6,800 German aircrew killed in night operations over Western Europe between 1942 to 1945, approximately 4,200, nearly two-thirds, were killed by radar-equipped British night fighters. Most died without ever seeing the aircraft that killed them, many without even knowing they were being hunted until the moment guns opened fire. RAF Mosquito crew losses were dramatically lower, approximately 280 crew members killed in all night fighter operations, 1942 to 1945, of which fewer than 100 were lost to enemy action, the remainder to accidents and operational causes. The aircrew survival ratio favored RAF night fighter crews by factors exceeding 40-1. These statistics, wrote Group Captain James Richardson in his post-war memoir, represent the most lopsided combat outcome in the history of aerial warfare. We weren't engaging in equal combat, we were systematically executing an enemy who had no effective defense. The technology gap was so enormous that German crews had virtually no chance of survival once we detected them. It wasn't war as traditionally understood. It was industrial slaughter enabled by electronics. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Allied intelligence teams immediately sought to understand what German scientists and military leaders had known about British radar night fighting capabilities. The captured documents and interrogations revealed a disturbing pattern. German commanders understood they were being destroyed by radar-equipped fighters but lacked the technical capacity to develop effective countermeasures. General Major Joseph Kamhuber, who had commanded the Luftwaffe's night fighter force through much of the war, was interrogated extensively about German night fighting doctrine and technical developments. His assessment, preserved in Allied intelligence files, was brutally honest. We knew the British had airborne radar by mid-1943. We knew it gave them decisive advantage in night fighting. But we could not develop equivalent systems because we lacked miniaturized components, adequate production capacity, and strategic materials. Every month, the gap widened. Every month, more of our crews died to invisible enemies. The Mosquito itself was impressive, He continued, but what really defeated us was the integration of aircraft, radar, and tactical doctrine. The British developed a complete system: ground control, airborne radar, trained crews, standardized tactics. We attempted to develop individual components but never achieved systematic integration. They fought as a coordinated electronic warfare system. We fought as individual aircraft hoping luck would save us. Luck didn't. Oberfeldwebel Karl Becker, the bomber pilot who had survived over 90 missions before being grounded with combat exhaustion, was interviewed by British intelligence officers in June 1945. His testimony captured the psychological reality of fighting against radar-equipped night fighters. You could not see them, could not hear them, could not detect them with any equipment we had. They appeared from darkness, killed you if they chose, and disappeared. Some missions, half our formation would be destroyed by invisible attackers. Other missions, we'd see nothing, but we always knew they were out there, watching us on their radars, choosing whether to kill us or let us pass. The psychological effect was worse than the physical losses, Becker continued. You can accept being shot down by an enemy you can see and fight. You cannot accept being executed by invisible weapons you cannot defend against. It destroys your spirit. By late 1944, most night crews were flying missions simply because refusing meant execution. We knew we would eventually be killed by radar-equipped fighters. We just hoped it wouldn't be tonight. In 1958, at a military technology symposium in London, German and British night fighter veterans met to discuss the technical and tactical developments that had defined nocturnal combat. Squadron leader William Bradford, now retired, met Hauptmann Ernst Weber, the German night fighter pilot who had survived a serried attack in 1944. I wanted to ask you, Weber said through a translator, did your radar really detect our Liechtenstein emissions from 50 miles away? Bradford nodded. Serrate could detect your radar at ranges up to 50 miles, yes. You were broadcasting your position to us continuously while hunting for our bombers. You couldn't know we could detect your radar, that technology didn't exist in your inventory. But we could, and we used it to hunt you. Weber's expression showed the pain of understanding. So every time we activated our radar to hunt, we were actually painting targets on ourselves for your fighters. We were helping you kill us. Yes, Bradford replied simply. I'm sorry, but yes. You needed radar to hunt effectively, but using radar made you visible to us. There was no good choice for you. The conversation shifted to the human dimension. Weber asked the question that haunted survivors, did you ever think about the crews you were killing? The men who died without seeing you, without understanding what killed them. Bradford's answer was thoughtful. During the war, no. We thought in terms of aircraft destroyed, missions successful, threat eliminated. The human beings inside those aircraft were abstract, enemy combatants, not individuals. After the war, yes. I've thought about them often. About how terrifying it must have been to know you were being hunted by invisible enemies you couldn't fight. I feel, not guilt, because we were doing our duty, but something like sorrow that war required that kind of killing. Would you have done anything differently? Weber asked. No, Bradford replied honestly. We had a decisive technological advantage, and we exploited it to save British lives and win the war. That's what soldiers do. But I can acknowledge that what we did, hunting and killing enemies who couldn't fight back, was necessary but not glorious. It was effective. It was decisive. But it wasn't heroic combat, it was industrial slaughter enabled by superior technology. The radar-equipped Mosquito night fighter's impact extended far beyond its kill statistics. It represented warfare's transformation from visual combat to electronic warfare, where detection and targeting occurred through instruments rather than human senses, where killing could be accomplished without the enemy ever knowing they were under attack. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, in his 1960 memoir reflecting on the evolution of air defense, identified the Mosquito with AI radar as the weapon that permanently changed night warfare. The Battle of Britain was won by pilots who could see their enemies and engage in visual combat. The night air war was won by electronics that could detect enemies in total darkness and guide weapons to kill them. The Mosquito represented the future warfare where sensors, computers, and guidance systems matter more than pilot skill or aircraft performance. What made the Mosquito revolutionary, Dowding continued, wasn't just that it was fast or well-armed. It was that it could detect, track, and kill in conditions where human senses were useless. Darkness, clouds, weather, none of these protected the enemy from radar. The night, which had always been a refuge from combat, became a hunting ground where electronics saw clearly and killed efficiently. That changed everything. The tactical doctrine developed for Mosquito operations, radar detection, instrument-guided approach, close-range visual confirmation, decisive firepower, became the template for all subsequent night fighter operations. Modern night fighters still follow this basic sequence. Sensors detect target beyond visual range, guidance systems position the fighter for attack, visual or electronic confirmation verifies target identity, weapons destroy target. The Mosquito crews of 1943 invented this methodology, and it remains fundamentally unchanged 80 years later. Perhaps the most significant legacy was the demonstration that electronic warfare and technological superiority could create tactical advantages so overwhelming that skilled, brave, experienced enemies became helpless victims. German bomber and night fighter crews were professional airmen with years of combat experience. But experience couldn't overcome the simple reality that British fighters could see them while they remained blind. Technology has always mattered in warfare, wrote military historian Sir Basil Liddell Hart in his 1965 analysis of the night air war, but the radar-equipped Mosquito demonstrated that technology could create tactical situations approaching absolute dominance. The Germans weren't defeated, they were rendered irrelevant. Their pilots' skill didn't matter. Their aircraft's performance didn't matter. Their tactical doctrine didn't matter. The British could detect them at will, approach undetected, and kill at leisure. That's not combat, that's execution by technological advantage. In 1985, at the 40th anniversary reunion of RAF 157 Squadron, elderly veterans gathered to remember their war service. Flight Lieutenant Robert Mitchell, now 67, stood before the memorial listing the 24 squadron members killed during the war and reflected on the nature of their victory. We were given a weapon that made us invisible hunters. We could see the enemy in total darkness. They couldn't see us until we fired. The advantage was so absolute that killing became routine, almost mechanical. Detect target on radar, close to range, fire, target destroyed. Again and again, night after night. The Germans had no chance, Mitchell continued. Not because they lacked courage, they were brave men. Not because they lacked skill, many were experienced pilots. They had no chance because we could see and they couldn't. In war, that's the only advantage that truly matters. We could see them. They couldn't see us. And so they died, killed by invisible enemies in a war where darkness meant death. The final testimony belongs perhaps to Oberfeldwebel Karl Becker, the German bomber pilot who survived the war but never fully recovered from the psychological trauma of facing invisible death night after night. In a 1978 interview, asked what he remembered most about facing British night fighters, Becker's answer was simple and devastating: the fear. Every night, the fear. Knowing they were out there, watching us on their radars, choosing when to kill us. Flying in darkness that had nothing from their electronic eyes. Waiting for the moment when guns would fire and we would die without ever seeing what killed us. That fear never leaves you. Even now, 33 years later, I sometimes wake at night in darkness and feel it, that terror of invisible death that could strike any moment. The British didn't just defeat us. They made us afraid of the dark.